You are in our using Zoom for hybrid and in-person events course. Welcome, welcome. You've been in any courses this week? Maybe you were just in one with me earlier, like Lisa and Andy and a few other people I'm seeing from 15 minutes ago, or maybe less. You know the drill. We like putting in the chat what's your typical building assignment and teaching assignment, just to know who we have here in the course.
And folks, we have I think we have 24 schedule or for people that have registered, and I realize it's a hot day and this is the last session. So I'm not expecting for 24 to be here. But right now we have 14. So maybe just we'll let people give their building assignment and their subject, and we'll let some people arrive. I wonder if we had a late class.
We're seeing some elementary, some secondary, not all over the board. Love that. We've got classroom teachers, paraeducators. Awesome.
Oh, Maddie, I do have an attendance form for this one, but do you just want to do it out of Zoom?
Yeah, I'll do it out of Zoom. So you might see on the slide, it has the link there for an attendance form, but I'm just going to look at who's registered for the course and our participants list here and track it from that. So you won't need to worry about filling out a form.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just gonna breeze through the chat here and just see what else folks have posted. Yeah, we seem to be holding steady at 14 participants in addition to our 3 instructors here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and start diving in. You know, in building this one, so this is using Zoom for hybrid and in-person events. We'll talk about some examples of times of hybrid and in-person events. And then, as the name would suggest, what we want to consider when we are using Zoom to make those events happen. That might include recording an in-person event using Zoom, but I think the focus is mostly on hybrid, where we've got some people that are, whether it's the presenter or another class, or certain groups are going to be in a different location because and then using Zoom to connect them. And so we'll get into some of the logistics and technical considerations when you try to set something like that up. I think everybody who's an instructor on this class has some experience with those, and I bet there's a lot of people in this room that have experience with those. And the hope is that we can all learn from each other about how to anticipate some hurdles and plan for them ahead of time. So again, you can go ahead and disregard that attendance form link. We'll just take that straight out of the Zoom attendance list. All right, cool. We got a couple more folks arriving. Oh yeah, our numbers are going up. Cool. All right, so yeah, I think we're up to 17 participants. With those numbers, if you want to raise your hand to your digital hand there to be called on, but otherwise maybe just stay muted. But yeah, the intent of this class is definitely to share and to dig into the specifics of some of the different ways where we might use these. So my hope would be that there's going to be some questions, and I think it would be great if folks want to speak out those questions, and then we can kind of talk them through as a group. But if feel free to use the chat as well. If you have something that you want to just put down in text, you can use the chat, and we've got folks that are watching that. Okay, so you have 2 instructional coordinators here today, myself, Pete Connors, and Maddie Oakley. I'm sure you've had a chance to meet us in other classes throughout the week. We're both instructional technology coordinators. I serve the East region, which is oh yeah, just turning on transcriptions for folks that would like those. I serve the East region, so that's most of the schools in Woodinville and that feed into Woodinville High School. And Maddie is our coordinator for the West region, which is most of the schools that feed into Bothell High School. And we are joined by Judith Bonifaci, who is a retired, Judith, mostly West Hill, where you see a teacher from the district.
Yes.
She is I feel like, how long ago was your retirement, Judith?
How long ago? 7?
Yeah, gosh, for 7 years now, Judith has been a lovely addition to our tech team. I feel like for a number of years, Judith has been an addition to our tech team. She often will take on special projects that I think probably one of the perennial places that you see Judith is deploying iPads out to staff members, that when those are getting assigned. But, we like to Judith has a wealth of experience in North Shore elementary classrooms. And so was a tech adopter, still is a tech adopter, but gives us a real strong wealth of knowledge with regard to tech adoption within the elementary classrooms. Judith is also a member of Reading with Rover and how long have you been doing Reading with Rover, Judith?
I've had therapy dogs for over 17 years.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And Reading with Rover, obviously an in-person experience most of the time where students are able to read with dogs. Judith has 2 adorable golden retrievers. But that's a program that went remote during remote learning during the they've had the opportunity to return to some in-person reading experiences. But that means that Judith has had some firsthand opportunities to deal with the struggles that can sometimes arise with trying to not only connect readers via Zoom, but also to include dogs in the mix. So hopefully the sentience level of your participants will be higher. All right, so here's our agenda today. So we covered our welcome and introductions. We're going to go right into examples of and share out of hybrid events. We've got some of our own to share, and then we'll put up a Padlet where people can share out some that they've been a part of. We'll then talk about some logistics with regard to Zoom, about how you can set things up so that these events can be successful. And then I've got some device considerations to talk about Zoom and using Zoom with iPads. A lot of times in these events, having additional devices that can be pulled into the experience are useful. A lot of times your teacher machine your Mac can be the hub where you're kind of the MC controlling everything. But then the device that's actually doing the audio capture, maybe the students are using an iPad, maybe your guest you're filming them with an iPad. So those things can be really, really valuable, but utilizing them on Zoom is maybe something that you don't have a lot of experience with, because when you're Zooming, you're usually Zooming on your Mac. Also, we've got a short section, or we'll try to keep it short because it's about active panels in Zoom. And I realize not everyone is going to have an active panel right out of the gate in their room. But I'll talk briefly about how you can actually connect those via Zoom and use them as a hub for your hybrid and in-person events. We'll talk about audio settings and considerations. There's kind of a focus on music or assemblies or something or things like that in that section, just so you can avoid some audio pitfalls. I've got one little bonus that I slipped in between the audio settings and the considerations and the closing. That's a device that might be able to help you with some of these events, and then we'll close out. I do think this one will be, we've probably a good chance that we'll be more in the 60 to 70 minute range here. Okay. So first thing we'll do, like I said, well, let's go here first. I'll circle back to that one because we don't need to necessarily log into Zoom right away. We'll go there next. So examples of hybrid events. We were brainstorming some, and we've got author visits where, because of the tech that we have available to us, we don't necessarily need authors to come directly to the classroom, or there's, so that might be a disparate thing where the author is in another location and they are zooming into your classroom. But there's also, author visits can also be hybrid events, right? Where you've got someone speaking in one room live to students, but there's going to be other classes across the building, or maybe even in other buildings in the district, that might be able to Zoom into that event in a hybrid capacity. We have digital field trips where folks are going to be visiting institutions, organizations, museums that they wouldn't otherwise be able to visit because of the distance that we can connect into via Zoom. Virtual multi-class collaboration. One thing that we can do here is and when we reference it a lot in our classes, like these opportunities to use the tech to connect with other classes, either in the district or in other locations. I know Maddie and I have supported teachers in foreign language classes that are connecting with students in other countries. But even just if there's, 2 fourth grades at nearby schools that are doing a similar science experiments, there's opportunity there that okay, these students all have Chromebooks, teacher has their MacBooks, there's opportunities to present to other classrooms in a hybrid capacity. And I think a lot of us probably feel like, yeah, that's something I'd like to do. But, when there's the tech barriers to it, make it such that, it's maybe not going to be worth it to pursue that. And I think that's something we want to try to see if maybe how do we get ourselves to a place where that doesn't feel as intimidating. Reading of Grover is another example of events that have been hybrid. Judith and I were talking earlier, and I know that it sounds like back in May, they've been able to do some in-person stuff. But as you can see in the photo, there's been some reading that's been happening completely remotely there. And Judith, for context, so in that image there, the dog is at the owner's, probably at their home. Is that how
Yeah, that's my dog. That's Jackie. He's at we have a landing here where we have a library and stuff, and he's listening to the story.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so and then when in an event like that, was the different students were cycling up to that iPad, or is that student's
Yes.
iPad and they were connecting to you?
No, we have a connection. Okay, there's one iPad so that there's one student at a time, and they each come and take their turn. And what they were doing there, if you want to know, is that they were telling the story of the picture they had drawn. And I was the dog is on an iPad at the house, and I'm on my computer writing their story so that I can then send the story back to the kindergarten teacher so she has what they said in their story.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so that way we have a dialogue keep going on how to create their, and then they copy their stories next to it, or they've written something and she doesn't know what they've written because she can't read the kindergarten words, but I do because I've typed it on the computer and sent it to her.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then we also have cross grade level lessons. And I know, as we continue to deal with the pandemic, like there's, opportunities to keep the number of people in a room down by leveraging some of these tech tools. So if you're collaborating with another grade level, you could do that via Zoom. And again, it's those tech barriers that I sometimes make that in my experience have made me feel like, well, I don't really know if I want to do that because I don't want to take on, all the audio issues that could happen or getting folks connected. Alumni and family visits. I know we've talked to teachers where, students that have graduated have checked back in. I know in some of the business classes, we've had college students that were former students connect, and say like from their campuses and other states, connect back and, give a talk about like what they're now doing based on with some of the skills that they picked up in that class. Also family visits, if there's a opportunity to meet students' family members, using these tech tools makes it possible for maybe some of those things that would be difficult to otherwise schedule to happen, but in a digital format. And hopefully with our active boards and active panels, like if we can get those people up on the big screen, then it's more engaging than watching a video or something about a particular person. Similarly, I think kind of the same story there for community volunteers, that if we have community volunteers that are going to be contributing to our classes, then they might be able to, it might be easier to schedule them if they're going to be coming through digitally, or just to reduce the number of people in that space is also going to be possible with tech. Yeah, Maddie.
I'm just thinking back to my experiences in the classroom and how I always tried to offer to parents when I was an elementary teacher, to parents and families, that I'd love to take volunteers in any way that you can volunteer, right? So I would say, if you drop off your kids in the morning, stay for an extra 10 minutes, like one day a week, and like help volunteer by reading with kids or helping me with some things in the classroom. This knowing how to use these different tools in ways that we've shared today will give you even more options for families to be able to volunteer. So let's say you have a parent in your class who works remotely. They could, if they wanted to, they don't have to, but they could on their lunch break or at some point in their day, block out time to come and connect and do something similar to what Judith did with Reading with Rover, where instead of being the dog reading with the kids, they're an actual parent listening to a kid read to them via Zoom on an iPad. So just know that this can be for big events and small everyday things as well. So
excellent. I dropped a link into the chat to a Padlet. If folks wanted to put in some examples of some hybrid events that they've had the opportunity to take part in. I see we've got a couple in the chat over here. I dropped in Reading with Rover into it, and here I'm going to resume the share so you can see what pops up in the Padlet, and maybe I'll even copy over Lisa's here to give us a little bit more. I really like this. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Lisa. I think that was great to have a real beekeeper come into the class. The idea too, I mean, I'm not sure if they did this. I'd love to hear, Lisa, is like, did they actually, were they sitting in their house or their office, or did they like grab a device and walk around their hives?
Sorry, say that again.
The beekeeper that you had join, did they like grab a phone or something and like take you out to the hives, or were they sitting in their office? Or their house?
No, she was zooming in from her class, but she was wearing her full regalia with the big hat and the mask. She showed us the boots that she would be wearing if she was going outside.
Yeah.
And she talked about how, the bees will only sting me if I make a mistake and do something that upsets them. And we talked about how she got the honey out and everything. I was concerned that my middle schoolers would be polite but not particularly engaged. I had to cut everybody off at the end of the 2-hour class period.
Oh my
They-
gosh, 2 hours.
It was fantastic. And we had, it was part of a whole unit. We had previously read a book about bees and learned about some of the different types. One of the fun things about special ed is that I could take stuff from anywhere and add it to a unit.
Yeah.
That's all.
Now, how did you get connected with a beekeeper?
She and I have been close friends since college.
Yeah. Oh, that is fantastic.
Yeah, she's an MIT trained engineer. So now, of course, she's a farmer and beekeeper in New Hampshire.
Wow. Wow, she should write a book. That sounds great.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. I'm already thinking ahead to this year's units. Okay, what excuse do I have to bring in my beekeeper friend, my cousin who wrote a wonderful book that we used that same year?
Yeah.
The retired cooking teacher that we did popcorn with. We linked my co-teach history class with her cooking class because we were studying the Native Americans in the southern hemisphere in South America, and they found popcorn. So we talked about the history. She talked about the science and how
Oh, wow.
there are different ways to do it. And the kids that had popcorn at home popped along with us. It was probably one of the best lessons of the year. Actually,
Yeah.
those 3 would be my top 3.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think that
Mhm.
and I see someone put here about career day, if you've got folks in your network, but then also just, I imagine like people at the salmon hatcheries, like there's probably a better chance of scheduling them for these types of things. And also to see where they actually work and the tools that they, maybe the beekeeper, if they were even able to visit here from New Hampshire, they're not going to be able to bring as much
Yeah,
as they're
she
going to
showed-
be able to show.
Yeah, she showed us her hives, and they don't look like hives on cartoons. They're big square wooden boxes with
Yeah.
spots in them. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah. I'm curious about the virtual trip to the zoo. Who is that? Whoever wrote that, I'm curious, like, how do you get something like that lined up? And does a zookeeper walk a device around? Oh. If I can see who wrote that, it's probably all anonymous, right?
Keep in mind, some people might have put some ideas versus what they've actually
Oh.
done as well. So
Very nice. Yeah, King County Library assemblies, family home visits. Let's see what else we have here. Theme parties. I allow students to earn theme parties, and I use Zoom so that students in quarantine may join us and do some of the same activities. Yeah, no, I mean, and obviously that's going to be something that that we might still need to wrestle with. Is like, we have students that could be in quarantine or out for or away from the classroom for other reasons. And because of our devices and because of our connectivity, like we have such a potential to keep those people included and to share, the outside world with our students. And I think we're just, some settings and a leap of faith away from making those happen, and so like Lisa's kind of, to both, and it's great that some of those become our favorite lessons, right? Cool. Yeah, then we got reading with other guest speakers. Maddie, Judith, any others that you want to share from your experiences?
I know I'm in doing a little bit of research for this class. I did notice that, just a quick Google search of like virtual field trips, or you can find some lists of different options that are available. Additionally, even if you look at some of the typical field trips that you might have done in the past with your classes, if you go onto their websites, you might find that they have virtual options available as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then we just got another ad to the Padlet talking about IEP meetings being so much easier with Zoom. I think that's become one of those, this is how we're doing this going forward, unless there's a reason that a family cannot attend via Zoom. It's been such removal of barriers for folks. Not everyone can come to school for a meeting at this specific time on this day, but they could maybe squeeze in that time on their phone or on their computer. So that's been really great. Oh, and Jamie said the zoo is me. She was just shy to talk. When we were teaching online, there are a few zoos around the country that have access to live feeds of their animals. So we visited a few animals and talked about them, watched videos about the animals that we visited.
Oh, great.
I like that, Jamie, because I'm really glad you shared that, because it's an idea of something that you can do without having to prearrange what that possibility is. So you have a variety of possible experiences there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's maybe a good place to start if you're trying to, like, it's not like the video feed is there. It's, you connect to it whenever you're ready. And so if there's audio issues or the URL isn't loading or something, it's not like there's a live person on the other side who is confused and waiting for your class. So that, is when I think of a gradually increasing the exposure, so to speak, that feels like a good one to start with. It's like, okay, can I get the audio to come out properly? Can I get it to show up on my projector or on my panel? And then if that all goes well, then maybe going into some of the live events is the next step. So yeah, that's a great one to have there. Cool. I think we covered what's in the Padlet. Oh, reading buddies. There we go. Yeah, I partnered with a 3rd grade class, and students Zoomed about once a month with their reading buddies. Yeah, so that's different grade levels, same grade levels at different schools. Good opportunities for connection across a distance. And again, even if it's just to create a little bit of separation, that's definitely a great way to go. And because students all have these devices, like, the opportunities there. Icebreaker activities, we experienced more involvement with show and tell in 3rd grade last year, more than in the classroom. Oh yeah. Oh, that's fun. So when they were remote, they were actually able to show something like from their home.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my husband's a kindergarten teacher in Shoreline, and when he was teaching remotely, every day would be show and tell of things at home, and kids would be have their time to bring their pets or their stuffies or whatever to show and tell each other about what their life is like at home. So
oh, that's awesome.
When I have a reward system in all my classes, and when we were in person, it would be things like, you get to use the teacher's rolly chair today if you have so many points. But having to adapt it to online, making you can show and tell your pet or your bedroom or something if you have earned 25 points. We will take 5 minutes out of class so you can show off your room or the dog that's sitting next to you helping your homework.
That's great. All right, I think we've covered the ones that are in the Padlet. I'm going to go ahead and move us over into some of the logistics. Okay, so let's go ahead and sign into Zoom. So we'll talk about our event setup and some things to think about if you're going to be the host. So while you're getting logged in, I'm guessing folks that if they came to this, you've probably at least been to Zoom, basics class, or you've had, obviously a lot of us that are sharing out have had some experience with Zoom or something like it. But if you're unfamiliar, it's go to Clever, my.nsd.org, and go ahead and click on your Zoom account to log in. Yeah.
Pete, I just want to mention, I believe just today, maybe yesterday, the kind of look of Clever when you first log in has changed, especially as a teacher. So when you get in, it likely looks like, and I access the portal as a teacher right now to confirm this. It'll look a little different for you, Pete. But when I first go in, I see Clever My School, like up on the blue bar, it says Clever My School, then it says My Teacher Pages. Then over to the right from there, it says District Page. And then Shared With Me. District Page is where your tiles are.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's where you're going to find it. Is there anyone here in the training that is fine with us using their view as a sample? If you are, just go ahead and like give a thumbs up. That way, Pete can access the portal as you, just to show what that view looks like. If there's anyone that's okay with that. Andy's fine with that. So why don't you search Andrew Galt and then do that access portal as user, and we can show that off. Thanks, Andy. So you can see what it normally has looked like. It's like, oh, where are all my tiles? So over just to the right, District Page, that's where all the tiles are, and that's where you'll find the Zoom tile as well. Phew, they're still there. They didn't disappear. I'm glad we figured that out.
Yeah, good find. Yeah. So then when you click on Zoom staff, that's where you'll go to get into your Zoom account. So I'm going to end that portal session. Oh, but I'm annotating because I was thinking about doing an arrow. There it goes. Thanks, Andy. Oh, yeah. 1, 2. All right. So, and this is, your login for Zoom. There's a few, once you're in here, I just want to go and say you're the person that's going to be hosting some of these events or these meetings. There's some tools that we want to make sure are turned on, and then we'll go into the scheduler and kind of go through the creation of an event. I mostly there's a few features that I just want to make sure that you're aware of where they are and how to turn them on and off. So, this is your profile here, but we're going to go down to settings. And this is all a stream. If you've taken our basics class before, you're probably pretty aware of that. So as I scroll down this, I come across everything, but I can also just search for things. So one thing I want to make sure is turned on is co-hosting. So if I typed in co-host and hit enter, and that just pulled me down to where it is. But you can see, Zoom's settings navigation is great, in my opinion. It's telling me the breadcrumbs here of meeting, in meeting basics. So if I didn't want to type it in, I'd go to settings, I'm in meeting, I go to in meeting basic, and if I scroll down, I would find co-host. So a couple different ways to get there. But I want to make sure that that one's turned on. There's probably, I think in a lot of our examples, there's situations where either the guest you're going to want them to have some control that they wouldn't otherwise have, or there's another teacher if you're doing class participation things. In Judith's example of reading with Rover, I would imagine that the teacher maybe sets up the Zoom event, and then Judith is a co-host of that event. And if they're doing any breakout rooms or anything, then Judith has the ability to do that kind of control as the co-host, that if you didn't make them the co-host ahead of time, it's, that's what a lot of this we're going to talk about today is like, just clearing up those little hurdles. Like, so that, you could run into that and say, oh, Judith can't make breakout rooms. Okay, quickly make her the co-host, but just having that feature turned on, if it wasn't, is something you want to make sure is done ahead of time. I think by default, it's on for everyone. I'd be surprised if you got in there and saw that it was off, but good thing to make sure that that is on. Another one I would want to make sure that you have turned on is breakout rooms. So I just search for the word breakout. That is in meeting advanced, if you want to scroll around to find it, but I would encourage you to use that search. You can see there's some check boxes with regard to breakout rooms. says that it's allowing a host to split meeting participants into separate smaller rooms. So that's what breakout rooms are, but allowing the host to assign participants to breakout rooms when scheduling. It's kind of a why not as far as having that one checked. Allow broadcast or host to broadcast message to participants. I leave that one checked as well, and allow hosts to view activity statuses of participants in the breakout rooms. I think, that's one that I have turned off, but I think, why not turn that on? Yeah, cool. So having those turned on, let's see if there's another, I want to see if there's one other one. Yeah, okay, that one's going to be there no matter what. Good. All right, so let's then pop over to scheduling if we were actually going to set up a session. And so up here in the top right, I've got my scheduler. And these fields are where I would go and make a session. So there's, right off the bat, you might have situations where if you do a digital, visit with an author or with an institution or a group, they might be sending you a link and saying, come, because they've got their own system that they use, or, a lot of organizations are going to have, their preferred tool, and they're going to serve you out a link. But if you're going to be the one who's setting it up, and I imagine, Lisa with connecting with some of her people in her network, they're probably going to be coming in to one of her meetings. That's one you're going to want to set up ahead of time. You could, of course, if you've been if you've been teaching remotely or in a hybrid capacity with Zoom, you probably have a standing class that you could give the person a link to, but I'm going to suggest that you consider scheduling a unique session for a hybrid event, because there's some things you might want to turn on or turn off that are going to be different than what you might do in your reoccurring classroom meetings. So you can see here, if I was going to say, I'm going to have a beekeeper visit for my scheduled meeting. I can, set up a time, or here, I'll give you one tip that can be useful. If I make this recurring, and I say no fixed time, now that there's no, that meeting isn't linked to anything. If I'm texting with say my friend the beekeeper, there's not it's when we're ready, that room just sits open and is available to me. I could even have an author visit room that it's a meeting I set up, and I have it kind of available to me. But you could also have it be something that doesn't have a recurrence. You can see here, you just fill it out, give it a duration. There's really because it's all when you open and close it, you don't really need a duration per se. So sometimes that's why we end up picking those no fixed times. But scheduler's there, and it's kind of as you want to set it up. You'd still leave registration off. Here's that part though, where I was saying if you're using your personal room in order to host the event or to host your classes, I would recommend that you generate a unique ID for these types of events, because I think you are going to probably tweak some of the settings away from what you otherwise would do in your classroom. So if you say generate automatically, you are going to end up with a different link, different invitation, email type of, that you could set up. But in this case, I think it'll be important, because you're going to be putting in things like co-hosts and setting up breakout rooms that you might not otherwise do on your personal meeting. I would suggest that you'll want a passcode. You're, in this case, the beekeeper. I would be sending them a link. So they're not going to necessarily need to input that passcode if they have the link that kind of has it built in, but it's going to add a level of security. I always recommend people use a waiting room, just so that you can see who someone is and at least what they're calling themselves before they step right into your room. This require authentication though, that's probably where you start getting into like why this is going to be different from your regular classroom is, you know, your friend, the zookeeper, the the parent, you know, they're not necessarily going to have a Zoom account, period. And they're probably not going to have, or, you know, unless they work in the district or something like that, they're probably not going to have a Zoom, or sorry, a North Shore Zoom credential. So you can see here that there are choices such as signing into Zoom with any account or authenticating to Zoom. If you were to require authentication and then choose either of those, if the person has a Zoom account, they might be able to sign in. That could be useful if they are a outside the district person that has an account and you want them to have privileges like co-hosting and things like that ahead of time. Yeah, Matt.
I just wanted to share one more option, especially if you are for some reason hosting a Zoom where it's not just you're hosting it and there's one other participant that is the speaker. Let's say you're hosting a Zoom that is for students to be a part of for a club after school. They're all joining it with their Zoom account, right? And you also have a guest speaker joining who doesn't have North Shore credentials. You could keep it as require authentication to join, but then there's also this option. If I can't find my arrow. Anyways, the authentication except you keep covering it, keep North Shore credentials, keep that one underneath it, authentication exception, click add. And you can put that person's name and their email address, and they will then get a unique invite link and it will let them bypass the North Shore authentication requirements. So if I know I'm doing career day and I'm going to have, you know, Mr. Jones, who is Bryson's dad, come in and speak to the class, but I want to keep it North Shore credentials, I can put his name and email address in there. It will send him an email. He needs to use that link to join, and then it will let him join the meeting with that specific invite. So that's another option as well. Just wanted to point that out.
Now, when you put in that that email address, does that make them have to have a Zoom account that's based on that credential though?
I don't believe it makes them have a Zoom account. It gives them a specific link to go into that specific instance of a meeting. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Without a Zoom account.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great way to keep your security tight, is to, you know, now anybody who comes in is still going to be either the account or the person that specifically got that link to be there. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Maddie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so now that person, that beekeeper who gets sent that email, that link to that email address, they're going to be able to come right into the meeting without any issue. Okay, so these are options that I think we talked about in Zoom Basics. I can skip right over those about like what happens by default. But down below here, it says options and then show. If you look at that ahead of time, you have alternative hosts. These are if you have someone that you like want to become a co-host ahead of time, or you want them to be able to start the event without you having to do that. Like, if you don't have to be there first. So I would maybe put in, you know, if I was saying, you know, Maddie and I are two teachers in the district that are going to work together on a virtual lesson, I could put in yeah, there you go. Okay, so I want a name for district for folks that already have an account in the system. Yeah, Maddie.
I just wanted to share too, I can't remember if we called out this other idea for a hybrid event, which is when we did some work with teachers and we were getting new computers and, you know, sorry, I can't speak. When we were doing the staff deployment and everyone was getting new devices in one of our very first schools that we were at, and we got the new devices and these teachers then came back to us and they were like, I need my document camera to be hooked up to my computer and I have to have Zoom working. And we're like, why? Why do you need that? We're all in person, not, we just were curious what's going on. It was totally fine. But they mentioned that what they did for science was one teacher would teach the lesson to all of the 4th grade students in their own classroom. And then each of the other teachers would help lead like the hands-on activity afterwards, but the lesson was taught by one teacher. So it was a way to differentiate instruction while limiting that, either you're limiting transitions and movement for like health safety issues, or if you have issues of just capacity, we can't have everyone in the same space, but we only want one person to teach this lesson. In that case, I would set up a meeting that would be, Thursday science lesson, recurring meeting, no fixed time. And I would make sure to add each of the other teachers as an alternative host. That way, those other teachers also have the ability to start the meeting. So if I'm running a little bit late, they don't have to wait for me to start the meeting. So whenever you add an alternative host, they can start it without you being there. So it's a great function. We definitely have been using that this week as instructional technology coordinators when we're working together, of adding each other as alternative hosts. So if one of us is ready before the other, we're ready to get things going. So
you can see, I just went through what Maddie was describing there and made this one. It's sometimes gonna be tricky to find that no fixed time, but you just make the meeting recurring. And then it's by default, it's gonna like ask you, well, what kind of recurrence schedule? But you just make it no fixed time. And now that's a standing meeting. But again, it's using a separate meeting ID, not your personal meeting ID, which is probably where you're doing yeah, good point, Lisa. Where you might be doing your class in general. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us have experienced what Lisa's referencing there, but like if you say you didn't make them alternative hosts, they arrive, they're just participants, you lose your internet connection. Now the meeting doesn't have a host, so it just kicks everyone out. And it just says the host is left. Whereas if you make them all alternative hosts and then you leave, the system just says, okay, well, if Lisa's gone, then Pete becomes the host. Yeah, Mary.
This actually happened to me when we were online learning, and what it did, it assigned the host position to one of my students
Right, I feel like I heard about
automatically, and then I frantically tried to get back on, and once
no.
I did, it gave me the host back.
Oh, okay.
And
I was
then
afraid that you weren't gonna be able to get back in.
No, I got back in just fine eventually, and the kids were like, where'd you go? And I'm like, well, I dropped out.
I believe this has been an update in Zoom that they've changed the settings so that if there's one host and that host loses connection, then the meeting ends.
Oh, okay.
Thankfully,
Good to know.
if you assign a co-host or anything like that, it'll switch to that person. But yeah, it was in direct response to so many teachers using it for remote teaching and saying, I, got kicked out of the meeting and my the kid wouldn't let me back into the meeting and I couldn't end the meeting and I didn't know what to do and I wasn't sure what they were doing. So it was like getting locked out of their own classroom and no one letting them in. But that setting has thankfully been adjusted. It sounds like that was maybe a common experience with internet connection issues at times.
Oh, no. All right. So I did want to just share one link with you here. I'll throw this in the chat. This is a chart that you can look at on your own that just shows, like, I think sometimes people wonder, like, what can a host do that a co-host can't? And that chart just goes into it. But I think for most of us, for the uses that we are going to be experiencing, that is, that's good enough to make them a co-host. Yeah, we just have this one slide here before we get into iPads. Just one thing, like we had like protocols for safety. If you're going to be doing, I know the question comes up of like, well, say I'm doing, a parent volunteers reading, reading with students. And we were talking with Shelby about this, and I think it's, a good rule of thumb is, think of volunteers or, one-on-one digitally, kind of how you would one-on-one physically, that, you would want, if someone has, would be a in-person volunteer, then they would have had a similar, or if they're just someone who's zooming in, maybe that's, if there's going to be a breakout rooms with outside people that aren't, volunteers within the classroom, having a district person, whether that's a para, yourself, volunteer, to be circulating is going to be important, just like you would if you sent somebody, into the hallway to read with another person.
So in the same way that you would, okay, read in the hallway with this volunteer, but we're leaving the door cracked open. Same thing. If you're sending a kid to read in a center pod, using Zoom on an iPad to read with a volunteer, read with Rover, have that door open, or have them in the quieter corner of the classroom, not completely removed from you and from another person there and supervising.
Yep, perfect. Yep. And then just that same idea with student work locations, that if you have students that are digitally collaborating, having some thought to, okay, how can I continue to be able to monitor what, within breakout rooms? Am I going to jump between them, or are the students, physically proximal enough that I can walk over and look over a student's shoulder and see that what's going on in that breakout room is what I expect? All right. So switching gears a little bit here. For a lot of these hybrid events, the leveraging an iPad is going to be useful. It's, they're good tools. You saw like it for reading with Rover, that a student is, might be using an iPad there to check in or to meet with Judith and one of her dogs. And in the younger classrooms, like, okay, there's a lot of iPads available, but you might be, if with students with Chromebooks, or if you just want to have like the reading with Rover station that's leveraging an iPad, that's either your staff iPad or a school iPad that you're checking out. Also, we're going to talk about swivels a little bit later. Same idea there, that there's times when you might be signing into Zoom with an iPad, and that iPad is either going to be like the hub, in the reading of Rover example, where people are connecting on, or it might be what you're using to use as like kind of your camera, your audio and video capture device. Yeah, Judith.
Yeah, what advantage it was that we had the iPad is the teacher could still teach using her computer, and everything was attached to the iPad. So it wasn't like her computer was totally unusable because it was attached to a Zoom.
Yeah. I think there's definitely like a behind the scenes utility to having, okay, here, like if your computer, it can be hard for the teacher device to be both like the hub, where all the control is coming from, and then also the device that's being used for presenting, or for talking, for communicating with the other class, or for being the device that's also going to be up on the screen that the students are seeing the animal feeds from the zoo on. Having a second device is often really, really useful, and the iPads can kind of jump in as that. I know the question will probably come up, so I'll just cover it right now. You can be logged into the same meeting on the same account on two different devices. So I think that was not possible in Zoom when we first started with it. If you joined, definitely if you tried to host two, and you still can't be the host of two separate meetings, I don't believe, but you can be a participant and a host of in two different meetings, and you can be a member of the same meeting, like a participant twice, essentially. So in the past, there were times where people would they'd make an account based on their Google credentials and then use their district one, so they could have two separate accounts. You don't need to do that anymore. So you can just be you can be signed into both devices. So anyway, this is what it looks like. Oh yeah, Meg.
Sorry, I just
No,
wanted
you're-
to clarify too. I know we have a lot of different ideas of hybrid event examples, but I just wanted to clarify that sometimes you'll have maybe a volunteer reading with a student, like in that photo of Reading with Rover. And the only thing that you have signed into Zoom is an iPad, because it's most convenient. It can just sit there. It's a little bit sturdier than having a keyboard out, and the teacher device is not being used as well. In some instances, you might have just connecting to Zoom on your teacher device, and you also connect that to your presentation system, so students can see the Zoom presenter on a large screen, and then your webcam on your computer is what's showing the presenter, the audience. And then there are times where you will connect your computer and the presentation system, and you'll join the meeting also on an iPad in Zoom. So I just wanted to explain that we kind of have a few different options there, and we're kind of going to be talking about all of those, and it will depend on what you want to do, what you need to do for deciding which tools will be best to use.
Question came up in the chat. Yeah, thank you, Judith. That was my answer as well. I'll just read it out. Do virtual family volunteers still need to fill out the background check forms? Yeah, they do. I believe the idea is that they're.
And a lot of that is online and pretty streamlined now, so it's much less cumbersome of a process than it was.
Okay, so that's the login process when you log into the app. If you do sign in, there's a SSO connection, just like you would on the app in Zoom, where you'll be taken to your email login, and you'll log in just like you were logging in to your email to get connected in the app. And then once you're signed in, you can use, if you're signed in as yourself and you've scheduled the meeting on your, say in the web version on your computer, that meeting is going to be sitting right in your queue on the app in like the agenda that you have. So then you can just join it. And that's even if you're already started the meeting on your computer, now you just sign in on the iPad and it'll show up right there. You've got this meeting that is either no fixed time and so is always available, or is going on right now. And you can join it, and it won't kick you out on the computer. It'll just let you in. I think what it'll do is append like my name. If I joined here on my iPad right now, would be like Pete Connors parentheses iPad, just to try to help you distinguish between the two devices that you have. So if you need to, like once folks have joined, if you didn't set them up as alternative hosts, in the participants menu, when you're in a meeting, you'll see that you have the ability to either pass off the hosting. There can only be one host. We got a Highlander situation there, but there can be many co-hosts. I believe that chart maybe says how many co-hosts there can be, and I don't think you'll ever come near it. But if you make other folks co-hosts, that might there might be an opportunity to do that. If, like, say, you didn't pre-program your co-host, you could instead make them a co-host. So this is when you're in a meeting, you pull up your participants menu, and then the screenshot I took a picture here of is once you hover over the person's name in your participants menu, you click on more, and you'll get those buttons. There'll probably even more buttons. If you are the host, you'll have even more buttons. But one of them will say make co-host. So if one of your colleagues or the volunteer is going to be, you want them to manage breakout rooms, you want them to be able to rename other people, you want them to be able to manipulate the recording, those could all be reasons why you make someone a co-host. You might have a class assistant or even a volunteer, class volunteer. It's super, super useful to have a second person who has like the near, at least parity powers within Zoom. So that's how you make someone a co-host if they weren't one to begin with because of their alt host status. Just got some photos here of breakout rooms and how you manage those. So if you were going to do things like, digital reading buddies, you could set up your breakout. You could create breakout rooms in the moment. In your control panel, I think it would say, or your menu, when you are in the meeting, you can go to breakout rooms, and you'll come up with this box that allows you to specify how many breakout rooms you want, and whether you want the participants to be assigned manually, automatically, or to choose. If people have recurring or the same reading buddies, say, over time, letting them choose can be really useful, or even something with like, hey, that you're at this time, you head into this breakout room, and that's when have your opportunity to read with Rover, maybe. But if you do it assigned manually, then you always have at the end of the day, you always have control over how you move people around. So now in this picture, the rooms have been opened, and you can see like this is your console for moving your students around these breakout rooms. So maybe you have some students that are reading together in breakout rooms, and if you want to recreate them, to say, okay, we're all going to switch, and now we're going to talk to another person about what we just read with our reading buddy. Instead of like moving them, doing exchanges and moving them all around, I can just hit recreate, and that's just like reshuffling the deck of people. And then I could use the exchange to separate, to make adjustments to what the reshuffle has looked like. But that's a pretty quick way to get that done. You can see in your breakout rooms, you've got some choices here, whether you want people to be able to choose rooms, returning the main session, how long those things stay open, and if there's a timer when you close them, or if you just want to be able to immediately close them. So again, student volunteers, digital reading, reading with Rover, all situations where you might be working in breakout rooms. And you can see these options. I try to call it out with this red box, but once you've created or opened your breakout rooms console, these options are all down in this gear. So it might not be like immediately obvious, but that's right there. Cool. All right, so that is iPads. We'll talk a little bit more about iPads when I get to the swivel section, which is coming up quickly. I did want to just have a short section here regarding the use of Zoom and active panels. So if you are someone who has an active panel in your class, these are the touch screen panels that Promethean makes. So they kind of the next evolution of touch boards. Oh, cool. Make it rip. Oh, great. Yeah. Have Lisa's breakout room comment there. She says, my history co-teacher would make breakout rooms called talk about the assignment with peers, chat with peers, and work with an adult. Students choose how they wanted to work. So yeah, almost like, to the left, like almost centers, but for, how they want to engage with the work that they've been doing. That's awesome. So if you have an active panel, I will share the slideshow with you because I think it's maybe more useful as a tutorial for people that have them, and I don't want to just like spend going through this with folks that don't necessarily have one. But there are webcams, and maybe this part is useful to everybody. You maybe saw an email during the period of time in which we were coming back into buildings and still teaching either fully or somewhat remotely. There is a webcam available to you. I believe they were in boxes and deployed to STSs. So if you haven't had one, haven't had the opportunity to use one, they're out there, and I would just check in with your STS about getting your hands on one if you wanted. There are little tripods available that you can connect them to, but they're just nice for, if you have a device whether that's your computer or, maybe you grab a Chromebook out of the loaner pile, or you have an active panel, something with a USB input, you could connect this webcam to the host device, in this case, an active panel. And now that device can benefit from a wide lens and a decent microphone capture. So let's say you're sitting at your desk and you want to, obviously your computer's camera is pointing at you, but your class is sitting out in front of you. You could take one of those webcams, put it up on top of your computer and face it out. And now the people that are connecting with your students via Zoom can see the class and they can hear the class via that mic. So something that applies to the active panels just as much as it does to your computer is access to these little webcams. As far as the active panels are concerned, they have an input for their USBs, for USB powered cameras, like right here on the side of the panel. Obviously you have that in the adapter that's connected to your computer. Again, we'll share out this slideshow, but on those panels, they do have the Play Store. In the Play Store, it's in the locker, which is the right there. It's one of the buttons on the panel. Play Store, sign in with your apps, log in, and grab and just install Zoom if it's not already on the panel. This is what the sign-in looks like on Android, which is what those panels are based on. They might look a little similar to what's on a Chromebook, but just like if you were using a teacher iPad or on your staff MacBook, you sign in with SSO, so same idea here. And that'll bring you in, you're signed in. If you created a scheduled meeting on your computer, it's going to show up as one of your options for what you can connect to in this session. You'll click on it, and now you'll be in the session. By default, if it doesn't pull up the webcam, this is something that I think a lot of us don't notice sometimes when we are on a device like an iPad that has multiple cameras available to it. In the top left of a Zoom screen, and this is, so again, true for iPads as well, there is a little camera switcher, and that's how you could switch, like on an iPad, between the front-facing camera and the back-facing camera. And when you use Zoom on an iPad, it's going to choose to use the front-facing camera, because I think a lot of us probably think of, yeah, I'm holding the iPad in front of me while I talk to my parents or something like that. But the back-facing camera on an iPad is actually a higher quality camera. And so if you were setting that up like on a table and facing it at your students, using that back-facing camera is actually going to be a little bit wider, be a little crisper. And so the way you switch between those cameras is going to be this little button in the top left corner. And that's true on the iPad and on the Android, which is going to be what's running on those active panels. Okay, so that's, that's how you get the Zoom up and running on the active panel. If you then have the webcam up on top of the panel, like you see in that photo, now you can see your whole class through it. It can act as a mic, and it's decently reliable as far as how the audio is concerned. So I do have this this last note here, which is just before you go through all the trouble of connecting a webcam to an active panel and trying to sign into it and run the session like as if it's the separate device, remember that you can just connect to these panels just like you can with projectors with a separate device. So kind of thinking like, well, do I want to just grab an iPad and screen share it or plug it into if I have a Chromebook or computer, plug it into my projector or my panel, might be a little bit more familiar and a little bit easier to use that way, but it is possible to do that through those active panels. All right, Maddie, anything to add on active panels? I feel like it's kind of a boutique thing, so yeah. I've got another feature here to share with you, just as we get towards the end here, that when you are in a Zoom meeting, I think a lot of us, oh, you know what, I should have put this one on my exam. I think we mentioned assemblies, but one place where I've helped out with Zoom sessions is like large scale assemblies or the school play, school musicals. Also, if you're a music teacher, you might run into these situations where you are trying to capture audio at scale and you feel like you're kind of fighting Zoom, because what Zoom is trying to do is filter out echoes and enhance audio. It's trying to listen for voices, just like your cell phone does when if you're walking over, a highway bridge or something like that. It's going to try to, it has multiple mics and it's running an algorithm and it's trying to capture voice and remove all that, extra sound. But you can actually tell your device to not do that. If you do want all the background sound because you do want that room filling sound that's coming across in a music classroom or in a performance, or you want to tell the device to use original sound. And I'm going to drop out of the slideshow there just to get you that link. So that goes into the chat here. In the top left, when you are running a session, you have a little button that says what type. It has a little picture of the audio, and you can switch back and forth between original sound and I forget what they call the opposite of original sound. But original sound is don't run those filters. Like, let me have the audio as its intent or as it's truly coming through. We learned about this when we moved to remote learning, and music teachers were finding that, like, if they were singing and playing an instrument, the students would hear the singing, but they wouldn't really hear the instruments. And that's because those echo filters and audio enhancements are trying to, they think it's background noise, and so they remove it. All right. Just a couple tips here. We have found that generally, often because of the echo cancellation and audio filters within Zoom, it is usually possible to use your classroom mics and your classroom sound systems and not get into big feedback horrors. Something definitely a test. You definitely recommend not having the computer like right underneath one of your speakers. But if you're going to be using your classroom mic system and then you have an iPad in the room that is capturing while you teach, say a history lesson to a grade level, you'll generally be okay. So, but something to try out, but not a huge concern there. I've got one tip here for you about what I was calling dynamic muting, which when you are on your MacBook, if you hold down Shift and Command and hit the A button, you will mute yourself. And I just think that can be kind of useful. Unmuted. It can be kind of useful, again, if you're going to be the hub, the person who's sitting at your Mac controlling the audio for a session, and then you've got an iPad set up somewhere. You can quickly, interject by using that hotkey rather than having to go over and find your mute button and click it and move between those. So, and then I just have this note here, what I maybe would call audio stewardship, which is just, trying to be aware of all the different places where audio might be coming in. Like if you're going to be joining this with an iPad, is that iPad going to be, probably you're going to want that iPad muted, but you're not going to, it's probably going to be the thing that's capturing the audio. There's lots of opportunities for feedback loops. And so kind of thinking, okay, which device is going to capture the audio and which device is going to produce the sound, and making sure that you've got things locked down in the right spots. The last thing I'd just share with you here is a link to our Swivel page. There is a device available for you can request. Well, now, Maddie, do we have these? We have one of these out in each building now, right? Yeah. So that link there, I think, is for the checkoutable ones, like from us, but I don't even think we necessarily need to. That's maybe a little out of date. We still have it in our toolbox, but Yeah, you have if you haven't seen the swivels before, I imagine a lot of us have. It's like a smart robot that looks for a marker that just like a little lanyard, little electric lanyard that you wear that captures audio and shares that audio back to an iPad app. The iPad sits in this robot and it spins around. And it's looking for that lanyard that you or your guest is wearing. And so you can connect to Zoom with that device, and then it's going to help the iPad follow you or your guest around the room. And so it's kind of like that TED Talk effect, but it's a pretty nice way if you don't have someone who's actually sitting there with the iPad, keeping it on you, allows you to move around the room, allows for good audio capture. People have been using them for a while for national boards, but we started seeing much more use of them during remote learning. And that's a tool you can use to dynamically capture what's going on in real time. Yeah, right.
So yeah, the swivels do have the ability to record videos, and they also have the ability, because there's a Zoom app built into the iPad, to work with Zoom. And so I know I definitely helped Canyon Park Middle School last year use it for their staff meetings when they had some folks who wanted to attend from their classrooms and some that were in person. Now, it's a new tool. It's almost like you've got your computer, you've got an iPad, and you have the swivel robot. So you've got kind of a third device and another tool of how it captures that video by needing to create an account with Swivel, which is pretty simple. So I would say the first time using a swivel can be a little like, okay, how is this working? What am I doing? But once you do use it once, it becomes pretty simple to use and can be a really helpful tool. So
nice. Yeah, so then just the last place I wanted to bring you before we close here is back into Zoom. And if you look at your personal side here, and we were in settings earlier. I'm going to cancel this meeting that I'm scheduling. And I just wanted to give folks a quick overview of the recording section of Zoom, because I think there's I imagine a lot of us would be, during one of these events, are going to record it. And then I don't know how many of us have maybe we had a requirement to record just for as part of remote learning. Some of us were maybe posting those in Schoology, but if you haven't had a chance before, this is the console in which they live. By default, they're going to be saved into the cloud, and Zoom does have a really good ability here to come in and see what you recorded, download chunks of it. Like this would be just the video with the audio, just the audio only, a transcript if you were running transcripts, and the chat file. You can get a shareable link for that. So if one of your guests wanted a link to what was shared, if they're going to be, you have that opportunity. You can download it and open it in a video editor if you want to trim it down, and in QuickTime or in iMovie, and work on it in that regard. You have that. Yeah, Maddie.
I just wanted to say too that you can, before you download it, if you click on that little thumbnail icon, you can watch the video there within Zoom. So you can check and make sure, was the audio captured? Did I accidentally share something on my screen, and maybe this isn't the recording that I want to memorialize forever? So you can watch it there first and decide what parts you want, and then download it if it does look like what you want to do.
Yep. Great. So yeah, that's your recordings console, and you can see here, you can, if you wanted to download all 4 of those files, it's just going to pull down a zip and it'll have those chunks. But it's probably this first one that you really want, which was the shared screen with speaker view. Yeah. So that takes us to the bitter end here. And yeah, we got 10 minutes. If there's any questions, again, don't worry about attendance there. We're taking care of that.
Huh?
Yeah. You have a question there? Yeah, otherwise, please reach out to Maddie and I. Like we said, you have a coordinator for your school or for your region and an STS for your school. I know these are intimidating projects, but like Lisa said, they could be some of the best ones, some of the most memorable ones. And I would absolutely like to ring this bell that if you're doing hybrid events and you want backup, we are very happy to be a part of that. So please reach out to your coordinator. I wouldn't be surprised if your coordinator and your STS would want to be there to join you in one of these adventures. And I guarantee you that with that much support, it'll go quite well. So, all right, thanks everybody. I'll stick around just see if there's any more questions. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to check. Thanks, Andy. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Maddie and Judith.
Yay, I love